this is a man who has reversed on a lot of things. Yeah, I mean, he has said he supports things publicly, and then 24 hours later he says, we're not doing that anymore. So I mean, he's very mercurial, and does change his mind. So I think I would say basically anything is on the table until there are literally either jets flying or we know jets have been grounded. Like knowing who he is, that seems to me to be the only conclusion we can draw.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today I've had Chris Cillizza on the show. He's a former Washington Post and CNN journalist and now an independent YouTuber. He has his own show, Daily Show. So we get into what's happening between Israel and Iran and the fact that Donald Trump is reportedly gearing up to potentially bomb Iran. So what a big step that would be, and how his MAGA supporters would take that, because he's meant to be the no-war president. So we speak about that and the fact that he's apparently reached out to conservative influencers to gauge how his voter base would take it if the US entered another war. So all that today on the Trump Report. You can watch us every day, Monday through Friday on Times Radio's YouTube, or you can stream us as a podcast every day wherever you get your podcasts. Chris Cillizza, a former CNN and Washington Post journalist and, of course, a political commentator and YouTuber. Thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thank you for having me.
So much to discuss, but I want to get your thoughts on Donald Trump. He's called for Iran to partake in a complete surrender. And of course, he has somewhat threatened the life of the supreme leader. Do you think this is enough to stop further escalation?
Well, Maddie, I think one of the things with Donald Trump you always have to remember is that he fashions himself as sort of the world's greatest deal maker. And he's always positioning to try to make a deal. I think if he had his druthers, he would prefer not to have the United States involved in this conflict between Israel and Iran, and make a deal. I mean, again, that's his default position. So I always say when you read these things on True Social or some of the things he says, I take him mostly seriously, but I think you always have to remember this is about jockeying for the high ground in sort of what he believes is an ongoing public negotiation. I don't think he thinks Iran is going to be like, okay, yes, we absolutely unconditionally surrender, right? I mean, I think he gets that that's unlikely, but again, he's trying to get himself in the best place to make a deal. It doesn't mean he will make one, because there are some deals that can't be made. This may wind up being one of them, but I think that's what he's aiming at.
Of course, we've seen him say that Iran knows where to find him if they want to come back to the negotiating table when it comes to this nuclear deal. And a lot of experts would have thought that they would have come crawling back. I think Iran's foreign minister said that he's willing to come to Washington, which Trump said was very brave. But what we now know is that it is being reported that Donald Trump has privately approved an attack on Iran, but hasn't given that final go-ahead. Look, he spent the majority of his campaign saying that he would be a president of no war. So do you think that this is too risky for the United States to involve themselves in this war by bombing Iran? Or is this actually what Iran needs in terms of stopping them from having these nuclear capabilities?
Yeah, I mean, the politics of this are complicated for Donald Trump, because he's when it comes to foreign policy, he said two things that are very hard to reconcile. On the one hand, as you rightly point out, he ran expressly in 2016 against this kind of what he called this war culture in America, which were symbolized by George W. Bush, right? He was like, why are we fighting in these endless wars? We don't need to be involved in them. So that definitely, I mean, I think that won him a lot of support in America, not just among Republicans either. On the other hand, there's lots and lots and lots of statements publicly by Donald Trump saying Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. So, how do you square that circle? I think this is that moment where you say, okay, well, can you reasonably expect that if the U.S. goes in there and blows up this nuclear site that apparently only the United States has the bombs to do, can it be a targeted strike and then walk away? I think some of that is not dependent on the United States, right? I mean, there's another country involved, the one we'd be bombing, how does Iran react? And so I think the best case scenario for Trump would be a deal of some sort that he could fashion as a victory. I think any military action, right, by the U.S. involving themselves in bombing Iran opens up a can of worms that, or a Pandora's box, pick your metaphor, right? It lets the genie out of the bottle. It's in any number of ways creates a situation that's a lot less predictable and I think a lot more fraught, but both politically for Trump, but also just policy-wise for the country.
We've seen that the Wall Street Journal has reported that the Trump administration has quietly been reaching out to a few conservative influencers online to basically gauge how they feel about the United States potentially involving themselves with Israel in this war on Iran. Charlie Kirk was apparently one of these conservative influencers. He then put out a poll, according to the Wall Street Journal, where 90% of his followers said that no, they do not want the United States getting involved in this war. Other staunch Republicans, such as Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, are also firmly against this. How do you think Trump's MAGA base, his staunch supporters, will feel about the US getting involved?
So there is a split in that base, Maddie, and we don't talk about it enough. There's a split between the people you just outlined, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan. Those people are very much more skeptical of U.S. intervention in other countries. I think they looked at Iraq, they looked at Afghanistan, and they thought, these things don't often end the way the U.S. wants them to end. We need to be very careful about involving ourselves in things that don't have direct U.S. national interests. There is, however, and these people are very MAGA too, there's the Ted Cruz, the Lindsey Graham, the Sean Hannitys of the world, all of whom are like, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to dismantle the possibility of Iran having a nuclear weapon. We need to act on it. So the base of the party is split. I will say, no matter what decision he makes, it's going to piss off some number of those people, right? Because he can't, it's very hard to do something in this, either we're going to bomb Iran or we're not, right? And that will annoy some people on one side of his base. What I will say, though, is Trump is unlike politicians that I've seen in the past, which is like, people just seem to go along. It's like, okay, well, he did a thing that I'm directly opposed to, but I support it because he's Donald Trump. You know what I mean? Like, the base has never abandoned Donald Trump. His great gift as a politician is being able, like the Pied Piper, to sort of lead the base wherever he wants it to go. I don't know that this situation will be any different. I do think, a lot of, if he does go ahead with a campaign to, even in a targeted way, bomb Iran, there are going to be a number of people who are MAGA folks who do disagree with that decision. Now, how loudly do they? Does it lead them to break with Donald Trump? If past his prologue, it won't.
Well, I think one of those, a smaller base within that MAGA supporters, Chris, would potentially be these military families that don't want their sons, their daughters involving themselves in yet another war. And of course, when Donald Trump came out and said that he wanted the Gaza Strip to be the Riviera of the Middle East, that potentially would have to involve boots on the ground, soldiers facilitating this ethnic cleansing, this infrastructure rebuild of the Gaza Strip. And quite a lot of people came out and said, no, we don't want soldiers in that area. And so, of course, this would be a similar situation. But I wonder if Iran follows through with their threat to target US military bases, and that does affect soldiers. So US soldiers are killed in this retaliation of US involvement. I wonder how that will change the opinion of MAGA supporters, military families.
I mean, that is the issue, right? This is my whole, once you go down the road of involving the US, even in a relatively limited way in this conflict, the outcropping of outcomes is very hard to predict, right? You're dealing now you're dealing with Iran, you're dealing with Israel. It's not as simple as a lot of the hawks, the sort of people who are very pro-intervention, at least in Iran, in the United States, say, we're going to go in, we'll do a targeted strike on this one nuclear site, and then we're out, and that'll be it. It's like, well, maybe, right? I mean, maybe that will be the case. But to your point, well, what if Iran responds by bombing a U.S. military base abroad? Well, the U.S. can't just have that. Can't just say like, well, fair's fair. I mean, you can't let that happen. And so this is what I think he is wrestling with is what is the likelihood if we do dip a toe in that water that like what ripples are in the pool after that. And that's really hard to know. And that look, there's a reason that there's one president. It's a hard job. The decisions that get up to that level are not the easy ones. It's not the 90-10 decisions. It's the 50.5, 49.5 ones. And I think this is one of those, which again, I think is a reason that Trump is taking as long as he possibly can, within a relatively truncated timeline to make the decision.
And that's exactly why we see all these threats from Trump, because he's hoping that the outcome will be that Iran says, okay, let's come to the bargaining table. But Chris, we saw Iran's deputy foreign minister come out and warn Trump against US involvement, against US interference. He said if the US wants to actively intervene in support of Israel, Iran will have no other option but to use its tools to teach aggressors a lesson and defend itself. Our military decision makers have all the necessary options on the table. But do you think Iran really has the capabilities to go up against Israel and the United States?
I mean, look. I hate to sound like kind of the ugly American, but it seems unlikely to me that an Iran versus U.S. war would end well for Iran. I mean, now that doesn't mean they could not inflict significant damage to U.S. interests around the world. The question I think that Trump has to consider is the possibility of, does this go from Israel and Iran to Israel, Iran, the U.S., and then a wider conflict that involves other people who see, China or Russia, who see potential advantage here for them. And that obviously is a concern. I mean, you do not want to be the president who started a world war, even unwittingly. And so I think he's mindful of that. I mean, look, all U.S. presidents, all U.S. leaders, but especially all U.S. presidents are mindful of their legacies. It's especially true when you're in your second term and you can't serve again, right? I think just yesterday, Donald Trump erected 2 gigantic flagpoles on the White House lawn so that, it's a legacy thing. I think I kind of roll my eyes at it, but he wants it there. So in 50 years, when somebody walks by the flagpoles, they can be like, Donald Trump put these here. It's literally a lasting marker of his time there. This is another lasting marker of his time. What did Donald Trump do? Look, there's a reason, Maddie, that he comes into office and the first focus on foreign policy is to try to end the Russia-Ukraine war. He's not been able to do that. There's a reason that he's trying to get involved, trying to negotiate a nuclear disarmament policy with Iran, although obviously that's much more complicated now with the Israel strikes. He wants to be a president that matters. He wants to leave a legacy that matters. The hard thing here, though, is the right answer is not simple. That what's in America's interest is not patently obvious, I think, to anyone who's really thinking hard about this. And I think he knows that at some level, the decision he makes, particularly if he makes a decision to bomb Iran, is going to be a line at some point in his legacy. We don't know, is it a paragraph? Is it a page? Or is it a line? We don't know, but it's going to be in there. And I think that's why he's so mindful of this. And I think why he is genuinely divided. I know he's okayed battle plans, but I don't think he has made his mind up yet to say, yes, let's do it. This is a man who has reversed on a lot of things. Yeah, he has said he supports things publicly, and then 24 hours later he says, we're not doing that anymore. So he's very mercurial, and does change his mind. So I think I would say basically anything is on the table until there are literally either jets flying or we know jets have been grounded. Like knowing who he is, that seems to me to be the only conclusion we can draw.
But is it now clear, Chris, that Donald Trump isn't the peacemaker, the deal maker he wanted to be? We know that he wanted this Nobel Peace Prize. I think that He hasn't even been in 6 months, and hasn't brokered a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. And mind you, it was probably a harder task than he thought it would be. And of course, now he's potentially involving the United States in another war that could lead to an all-out war in the Middle East. So he's not a peacemaker. Is that what we're getting at now?
Well, again, I always hesitate because I think, on Truth Social in 10 minutes, there could be an announcement that he has brokered a deal. Do you know what I mean? Like I have learned over a decade of covering Donald Trump that I never say he is or he is not something, because in 15 minutes it could change. I will say, I think it was always overly simplistic to anyone with even a rudimentary knowledge of foreign policy to think that on day one of his presidency, Donald Trump was going to come in and tell two foreign nations, stop fighting. We'll just go in there, we'll tell Putin, we'll tell Zelensky, and they'll just stop. That was never credible. It was ridiculous that he said it in the first place. The Iran nuclear deal, I think he very much wants, because Maddie, you hit on it. I think it's so important to keep in mind. Donald Trump wants to win a Nobel Peace Prize. Donald Trump likes public recognition of himself. This is a guy who, when in his golf clubs, before he ran for office, in his golf clubs, he had fake Time Man of the Year covers made and hung. Right? I mean, this is someone who likes outside recognition. Barack Obama has a Nobel Peace Prize. Donald Trump wants a Nobel Peace Prize. So again, that's always, I keep that in the back of my mind, because I think he ultimately does not want to strike Iran. He may feel like he has no choice, that they refuse to come to the negotiating table, and he'll do it. But I think he would like himself to be remembered as a great deal maker and peacemaker. Now, situations, you don't control other foreign actors, might not be able to do it, but that's why until sort of the last second, I think that's his default setting. Now, I don't know if it'll work, but that's where he wants it to end up.
What do you think will happen, Chris, if if the United States enters into another war, they get involved with Israel in this war in Iran, the economy plummets after these Liberation Day tariffs, whatever ones are left standing in the next month, and this causes a recession the way economists had predicted within the second half of the year, and immigration, doesn't get to a point that conservatives want it to be. These are the three things, I guess, he campaigned on. Will he survive this politically? I mean, of course, we know that he's not going to run again at this stage without any constitution changes. He won't run again. But how will he be viewed at the very least if the US goes into another war, the US goes into a recession, and immigration doesn't get to the level that conservatives want it to be?
Oh, I mean, Republicans would be crushed in the 2026 midterms. And honestly, Maddie, especially out of those three things, the most important one, it may not seem like that from across the ocean, but the most important one domestically for Donald Trump and the Republican Party is the economy. If the economy starts to falter in a major way, Republicans are going to lose badly. They'll lose the House, control of the House, which they barely have right now, but they do have a majority. They'll lose that. They could, although I think it's unlikely, lose the Senate. But again, I think it's important to remember Donald Trump's timeline is not necessarily the Republican Party's timeline. Remember, Donald Trump has 3.5 years now to cement a legacy. If you're a Republican who's on the ticket in 2026, a senator, a House member in a swing district, you only have until next November. So it's like you need him to do things in this next 6 months that put the national political environment in a favorable place for your party. He may be looking at 2-3 years down the road. So, but if a scenario like that came to pass, yes, I think Republicans would be crushed in the midterms. Though I would say it would probably still be the economy, then a war, then immigration in terms of how people process this stuff, particularly if the economy was in recession. That would be his biggest problem, I think, domestically from a political perspective.
On the note of this position that Vladimir Putin has put himself in, he's in this rare position right now where he has a relationship and has spoken to Donald Trump, Iran's president, and Israel's president. So it's kind of an awkward role for him. And he called Trump on Wednesday, and Putin offered to help mediate, ending the Iran and Israel conflict. Trump said to reporters, he goes, "I spoke to Putin yesterday and he actually offered to help mediate. I said, do me a favor, mediate your own. Let's mediate Russia first. Vladimir, let's mediate Russia first. You can worry about this later." Now, some people might look at that and say that was quite a good response from Trump because, no, we don't want Putin mediating. Yes. We want him to end a war. So what was your reaction to that?
I mean, look, I don't think Vladimir Putin does a lot of things out of the kindness of his heart. You know what I mean? Like, oh, hey, this isn't going well. Let me see if I can help. I mean, they clearly see the potential for advantage for Russia. I mean, Putin's entire life in politics has suggested that. I'm not, he's the head of Russia. Fine. But yes, that is the right response from Donald Trump. We do not need Russia now involved in trying to broker something because, look, what is Russia going to do? They're going to broker whatever they think is in the best interest of Russia. That's not necessarily in the best interest of the United States, Iran, or Israel. So, yeah, I actually think that was the right response. Trump, when it comes to Russia and Putin, has been, he is very rarely criticized Putin. He has lately more about the continued bombings into Ukraine and, that maybe Putin doesn't want a peace settlement, which I think a lot of people in this country roll their eyes and say, no, duh, like, obviously. But I actually think that's the right thing to say because that just, it puts another major player in. It complicates an already complicated situation. And again, from a U.S. perspective, I'm not sure that we can depend on Russia to have our best interests at heart.
And I think people have been waiting for this condemnation from Trump about Putin because he put this 2-week deadline, May 29th, and we've heard nothing about it. He said he's going to respond differently if he feels that Putin is proving that he doesn't want peace, which of course we've seen numerous attacks and numerous aerial attacks from Russia into Ukraine since that. And we've heard absolutely nothing about this 2-week deadline. But then of course we saw Donald Trump go to the G7 in Canada. He complained about the fact that Russia had been kicked out of what was then the G8 in 2014 after they annexed Crimea. Trump claimed that there would be no full-scale invasion of Ukraine if Russia and Putin weren't kicked out of the G8, which is now, of course, the G7. But then we've now seen in the last few days, Chris, the Kremlin ordering one of their largest airstrikes in Kyiv, which killed 15 people, but it included an American citizen. We've seen the State Department, Tammy Bruce, a spokesperson, she came out and spoke about the strike, but we haven't seen Donald Trump come out and condemn Vladimir Putin for orchestrating an attack that killed an American citizen.
Maddie, what I would say is Donald Trump's timelines are utterly changeable. I still remember in 2015, when he was a candidate, he was going to release his taxes in 2 weeks. Well, it's 10 years later and he hasn't released his taxes. Another example, TikTok. TikTok was supposed to be either banned or sold to a non-Chinese owned company in the United States. Well, he's about to extend again that timeline. That will be the third time. So I always say when Donald Trump, if you say anything, he'll say, I'll give you an answer in 2 weeks. I mean, it's sort of his default response. He doesn't really mean it. When it comes to Putin, though, I think it's very complicated. Trump likes to say, he says it all the time, no one's been harder on Russia and Vladimir Putin than me. I would say the facts don't entirely bear that out. At the same time, I don't think the left in America likes to portray Trump as a stooge of Putin. I'm not sure the facts bear that out either entirely. Again, my basic view, I'm going back to the Nobel Peace Prize thing. My basic view of this is Donald Trump is not a stooge to Russia. Donald Trump wants desperately to matter in the course of history, to be an important man of history, to be a president that has a chapter or a book written about him, not a page written about him. And he views, at least in the world, we can debate this, but I think he views the world as the United States, China, Russia. And so how can he How can he make peace? It's to go to another big power and figure out a way. They're going to dictate terms, figure out a way. They go to Ukraine and say, here's the deal. So I actually think his relationship with Putin is, I think, like his relationship with almost everyone else, just purely transactional. How is this good for Donald Trump?
Chris Cillizza, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Always happy to be here. Thank you.